All right, everybody, we're right on the magic hour. If you want to have a seat, we'll get this show underway. Hey. Well, thanks everyone for coming out. I'm Frank Alman. I'm the mayor of Tucker, and I wanted to let you know right away, Ann Lerner and Kara Schroeder from our city council are here. Ann represents District 3. If you know the city by districts, actually there's a map over your shoulders back there, and you can see our city council districts. Kara represents District 2. And actually I live in District 1, so we're covered, full coverage tonight. Yeah. This is our third of 3 of these public meetings. We've been around speaking at various community groups and business associations and things like that. We have some materials. If you haven't already gotten them, you can take them with you tonight. They'll contain a lot of the same information we're going to go over. There's a page on our website that has absolutely everything, and it's actually, because it's live, we can update it as we get new questions or need to clarify something, anything like that. So tuckerga.gov is our website. Hope you'll know that and make use of it anyway. /publicworks is where you'll find all the material, questions and answers and details about what we're going to be talking about tonight and what's on the referendum. First of all, how many of you have voted already? Excellent. Thank you for that. I confess to Sonia that I voted yesterday, but I saved my sticker so that I could wear it and remember to make that point tonight. So we have a PowerPoint that I'm going to go through that attempts to cover all the things we anticipate you might want to know, and including questions we gotten at earlier versions of this. So we'll get through all that, but we'll also have plenty of time at the end to take whatever time we need to answer questions and clarify anything particular for you. So I think that's that. We also have, I'll mention Tammy Hanlon's here, our city manager, John McHenry, our deputy city manager, Ken Hildebrandt, who's our city engineer, and Sonia is our head of communications. So you've got all the high-powered brains you need in the room, and we will take good care of you tonight. So here we are. I'm going to try to do what they tell you and not read these slides to you, but tell you the important parts of them, maybe expand on them just a little bit. So November 8th is election day. There's a question on the ballot that we're going to show you exactly what it looks like. Main thing I want to tell you right off the bat is, if you haven't voted, this is the last item on the ballot. You got to get through every other election. There's some statewide referendum questions. Ours is the last item on the ballot. So please work your way down and don't quit early. If you're going to skip some, go ahead and skip all the way to the end and get to our question. Basically, what it asks is, shall Tucker take responsibility? Is the city itself take responsibility for public works? But what we call public works differs. Every city sort of uses that term a little bit differently. So important to understand, in our case, that means roads and maintenance, which is different, and we'll talk through this a little bit. Different from what we're doing right now, where we pave roads and do big capital projects. That's a separate thing. That comes from SPLOST money. We're doing that now. We're going to keep doing that. Maintenance is potholes, signals, signs, striping fades, curbs get broken. Those are things that, under our current structure, you're paying taxes to DeKalb County to provide that service. Half of this proposal is that those taxes would instead come to us, and we would provide that service out of the city government's offices. The other half of public works in our case is what we call stormwater. There's 3 kinds of water. There's drinking water, there's sewage water. Stormwater is the only one of those 3 that we're talking about. And this is the water that falls on your house, falls on the roads, sidewalks, parking lots. It runs off and it's got to go somewhere. Stormwater is the system that manages that water. So detention ponds, pipes that go under the ground, drainage ditches, those things. One of my favorite terms I've learned as mayor is called a catch basin. That's the funny flat thing when you lose your ball in when you're playing in the street. That's part of the stormwater management system. And so that's what we're talking about when we say stormwater. So that's what the referendum is. Shall Tucker take over responsibility for those 2 services? And so I mentioned some of those things there's a listing. And again, the specifics are online and in the materials that you can take with you. Roll on there, Sonia. So here's the thing. Since we became a city, all the services that I've just been talking about are provided to the citizens of Tucker basically the same way they always have been. From the county through the county's departments that do those things under what's called an intergovernmental agreement. So as a city, in the most technical legal sense, we're responsible for those things, but we fulfill that responsibility by contracting with the county to keep doing what they've always done. So you pay taxes to the county, they provide the services, and it goes on. What we envisioned when we became a city was that we would be working closely with the county as kind of an advocate on behalf of our citizens for all of these things. When things go well, they go well. When something doesn't or somebody needs help, we are meeting with them once a month. These staff folks who I just introduced meet with their counterparts in the county, and they have a running list since day one of every issue that's ever either been reported by a citizen or that we became aware of on our own. For any reason, it goes on the list. This is the unhappy news about how that's gone in terms of responsiveness and getting these issues addressed. These are the average days to complete those various kinds of needs around the city. We think we can do better. And this goes back to the way and the rationale in which we formed the city. We didn't, when Dunwoody and Brookhaven became cities, they passed a referendum that created their cities somewhere in the second week of November. On January 1st, they were a full service city responsible for everything. We took a different approach and said, we really want to do the things that we know we can do better locally and that matter more locally, and continue to cooperate with the county on these big issues like the water system, stormwater, some other things. But we said, and there's a provision in our whole charter is written around the idea that if we find that we believe we can provide something more effectively, more efficiently, whatever the particulars are, we could take over that service. But your city council can't do that on its own. Neither can we raise the taxes that are necessary to pay for those services. It has to be by referendum. So what's happened is the city council has recommended, we had a vote that said, let's put this on the ballot so our citizens can decide it. That's why it's on the ballot November 8th. That's what this is all about. And so we are saying, we think we can do better on these issues. We think we can manage it locally and provide a more effective service level for our citizens. So our goals are, first, there's this big backlog. All the things that have been on the list that as of today haven't been completed as of the time we would be in this business will not have been completed. So job one is to address that backlog, and we're going to talk about the money involved in that. The big idea is address that backlog, get up to a level where we're now just maintaining. We're not backfilling and putting out fires, as it were, on all these subjects. Get that dealt with, get to a level where we're just doing maintenance, and that the response times on those maintenance calls are much reduced. We are 1000% confident we can do 50% better real quickly. We think we can do even better than that in the long run, but we certainly think we can do that, including customer service, where you reach somebody when you have a problem, a complaint, or whatever it might be, and local accountability. Here we are, just as we are in other aspects of the city. You know where to find us, and we're happy for you to hold us accountable on that. So here's, I think, going to be the referendum question itself. There it is in the blue box. I won't read it to you, but it says, in effect, what I've told you. There's some pictures of the kinds of things that it addresses. It's a yes or no question. Shall we do all these things? Yes or no? And we're going to talk about the ramifications of either. You probably know this by now. You can vote on this issue just like every other issue that's on the same ballot. So absentee, early advance voting, which is going on right now at the Tucker Library. And then you can show up on election day, November the 8th. This is probably the most confusing aspect of all of this. And I'm going to, before I even talk about what is a mill, the two services that we're talking about are paid for two different ways. So I'm going to take the simpler one first. Probably come up on a slide next. That's all right. I'll just talk and then we'll find the right slides. How about that? So right now, you pay for stormwater through a fee. It's $4 a month for a single family residence. Doesn't matter how big it is. It's not based on the value, none of that. $48 a year, every single family residence pays the same thing. That's the DeKalb has been charging that rate, I think, since 2001. Basically, since they established the stormwater utility for the first time, they established that rate. Hey, they've never increased it. And so, in my view, and a lot of our views, even if they were doing a spectacular job, they don't have enough money to do what needs to be done. It's been a long time, and it just doesn't add up. Our intention is to raise that $4 a month to $6 a month, which is $72 a year, or a $24 increase. And again, that would apply any single family residence in the city. Roads and maintenance is funded through a tax, through a property tax, which is what the millage rate relates to. And there's several slides in here, I think, that talk about that. But you see here, a mill is the rate at which a property owner is assessed property taxes on the value of their property. A mill is $1 per $1,000 of taxable value. So right away, we have to be sure we're clear on the terms. The county assesses the value of your property, which may or may not even be in the ballpark of what you think your property is worth, but in any event, they assess it. They take 40% of that value, and then they charge a millage rate against that taxable taxable value. So we're going to show you some examples of how that works and what we think it takes to provide this service, but I'll hold that till we have a little more detail in front of us. Go ahead, Sonia. Well, it's changing subjects a little bit. It all needs to be covered. So the referendum's November 8th. We need a majority of yes or no to make that decision. If it passes, we've actually already begun a lot of preliminary work, but immediately we get to work. We have to not only plan how to implement the service and get all the things in place that'll be required to actually fix all the stuff. We begin that immediately, work on that through December, January up through June. July 1st is when all this would be effective. So it wouldn't be November 9th, you call me to say your catch basin is broken. We have that transition period until July 1st of next year, partly for us to get ready and partly because we have to inform the tax commissioner and they have to get the right tax bills and all that sort of thing. That's the timeline if the referendum passes on November the 8th. Okay, so we're back to costs here. We're going to show you this online. It's also in the materials over there, and it's also in our materials online. But to start with, we say the average home value in the city of Tucker is $328,000. When you take 40% of that, you apply the millage rate that we intend to charge to fund this service, it amounts to $70 a year to cover roads and maintenance. So if you're tracking with me, it would be a $70 increase on the average house in Tucker. It would be a $24 increase on every house in Tucker, total of $94. If your house is worth a bit more or a bit less than that, it'll vary, and we're going to show you some examples of that. It's still not huge numbers that we're talking about. So there's that equation I was just talking about. This is just to show you. So the first line there is what DeKalb County is charging. That's the $4 a month that I mentioned. These are other nearby cities and what they're charging, which we show you mostly to say, one of your appropriate questions is, well, how do you know how much it's going to cost to do this? And what if it turns out to be a whole lot more? Or what if there's some huge event right after you take over? Where does the money come from? We're going to talk through that. But one of the ways that we give ourselves some confidence that we're in the right ballpark is looking at what other cities charge for the same service, especially other cities. Dunwoody's probably the closest example in terms of like miles of pipe underground, square miles of the city, roadways with curbs and gutters. As I mentioned, they did it on short notice. That kind of, stuck their finger in the air and hoped for the best. but now they have 6 or 8 years of experience with it. When did they become a city? 12 years. And so we can draw some confidence from their experience and other similar places. So we'll be in alignment with them, both from the view of, are we charging something appropriate to our homeowners, as well as, is it enough to cover the service? Okay, so what if my home's worth more or less? We're going to show you some examples. So there's the 328, which is the average, second from the left, shows that $94 that I talked about. If your house is 228 instead, the total difference of about $73. And you can see what happens with homes that are a bit more expensive than that. It's a little bit frustrating because your tax bill is very specific to you. It's specific to the value of your home. It's specific to the value of a new assessment that might happen. It's also subject to exemptions that you might be eligible for that somebody else is not. So this includes the standard sort of homestead exemption, but maybe you have a senior exemption, or there are other exemptions that might change that, even on a house valued the same, a few dollars difference. But you can see the tolerance is pretty narrow given the value of a typical house. And we're going to actually show you a tax bill here in a minute that you can judge by. Anybody ask themselves this question? There's several really important reasons. First is, we've been talking about this for a long time. We started talking about this pre-COVID. And we came very close in the early days of COVID. We had it under consideration, and we got right to the cusp of doing this exact process, and just decided we couldn't do an effective job of educating the public and giving it fair consideration in the midst of all that. We have continued prior to that, and especially since then. Our greatest desire was to innovate a way for a city and a county to work together on this and produce something maybe that's better than anybody had done before. And we tried a number of different things, lots of negotiations with the county. For a lot of reasons, it hadn't worked out. I won't go into all the specifics about why, except to say we have worked and worked and worked on finding a way. So this is us saying, we think we can do better. The timing it's been around for a while, but there's some particular things that apply now. The last bullet point here, the American Rescue Plan. I don't know if you remember, during COVID, there was something called the CARES Act. It was a federal government program. They sent a huge amount of money down to states and counties and ultimately to the cities. The city of Tucker got a little over $4 million in the CARES Act. And most of that money went to directly supporting individuals, rent, utilities, kinds of things to keep people in their homes and operating during the pandemic, and to small businesses. We had a little over $2 million, maybe 2.4. It was a lot of money. $15,000 grants that we made to small businesses in Tucker to help them survive the pandemic. There were some other things we did around childcare and a few other things. But a year later, this American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, came along. It was several times as big, like $2 trillion from the federal government, again, pushed out to more local governments, states, counties, and cities. It allowed a little more flexibility in what the money could be spent on, but the general idea was to do the things in those local places that would help us survive, be resilient against some future public emergency, maybe a health emergency, but maybe natural disaster, other things. So stormwater was specifically called out. Broadband, we learned during the pandemic, for people to work from home, for students to do school from home, broadband was critically important in that scenario. And so they gave a lot of guidance that was the kind of thing they wanted the money spent on, but a bit more flexibility than they had in the CARES Act. So we got 4 million plus or minus from the CARES Act. We got 13.6 million under the American Rescue Plan Act. We've spent some of that. We've allocated some of it, but there's a chunk of it that an undetermined amount, but allows us to clear this backlog that I talked about of things that need to be done. and to provide ourselves a cushion against something unexpected. You know, over time, big things are going to happen. The question is, what if it happens early on when you haven't collected much in the way of fees and things? This gives us the ability to do that. We have to allocate those funds by 2024. So we're in a window when we can decide to use it in this way and really give ourselves a jump start as well as some safety in the provision of this service. It's important that, you know, we didn't just say, doggone it, we're sick of DeKalb County, we're going to go do this ourselves. We've done a lot of work to assess what's out there, what it'll cost, how, you know, we manage the cash flow and the timing of it all. So we voted in July to put this on the ballot. In 2021, a year ago, we did a study with Atlas Technical Consultants, and we're going to talk about a more thorough study, but we asked them to go out. First of all, there are dams in Tucker, you know, Lake Aaron at Henderson Park, Cofer Lake at Cofer Park, John's Homestead. Those are stormwater detention. And that's what that water is. When it runs off your street and off your roof and down the drains, a lot of it ends up in those places. And they're secured by dams. So the first thing we want to know is, what's the state of those dams? We've been asking that question anyway. Those have been the responsibility of the county. They would become the responsibility of the city. So we had Atlas give us a report on the state of those dams, as well as a lot of spot checking where old county records say there should be a 24-inch corrugated pipe down there running stormwater. Is it really there? What kind of shape is it in? Is it really 24 inches, or is it half that or twice that? So we sent them out spot checking a lot of those kinds of manhole access, catch basins, so on, just to give ourselves, again, some confidence that we know what we're getting into. It's not a top to bottom thorough analysis of every facility, but we're going to do that too. So that's just all to say we've done a lot of work to be as sure as we can that we know what we're headed for. These again, list of the services. Here's your tax statement. Hey, come on in here. So we wanted to show you exactly, as best we can, what the impact on your taxes would be. And so this is John Doe here. No, he's not here tonight. This is John Doe's tax statement. And the three blue arrows on the left side there are pointing out the important parts. So on your tax bill right now, there's a line that says Tucker Tax District. That's what that little abbreviation is. And it shows you, here's the assessment. So this is the $328,000 house. 40% of that value is what's taxed. And it's taxed at a rate that I can't begin to read to you from here. Decimal place plus 3 zeros and then 966. That's 9.66 tenths of 1 mil. In other words, it's just a hair under 1 mil that the county is presently charging, and that's the line that covers roads and maintenance. That's what you're paying right now on if you are John Doe in the average house. The second line that's highlighted there says city taxes. That's City of Tucker. And that's a millage rate that we are presently charging. This is the only property tax Tucker has right now. And it's the tax that we adopted to fund our parks when we, just after we became a city, we assumed responsibility for parks. We also assumed the tax rate that the CAB was charging at that time to fund parks. Lots of discussion to be had about whether that rate was appropriate or enough or too much or anything else, but it is what it is, or it was what it was. It was 9 tenths of 1 mil. The city actually rolled back that tax this year. So it's lower than where it started out to account for the fact that property values have generally gone up. In the meantime, we're not trying to collect more taxes, so we reduced the rate by an amount that basically kept it even. With me so far? There's one more line. It says stormwater. You see $48. That's $4 a month for a year, 48 bucks. And so you see that goes across, goes into the total of the tax that you pay, taxes and fees that you're presently paying. So here's John Doe under the new regime, should the referendum pass. The first line, that Tucker Tax District, goes to 0 because the county's not going to charge you that tax anymore, right? We take over the service, they give up the taxes. but it gets added into the second line that says city taxes, and now instead of it being 0.8 something something, it's 2.3 mils. That means should the referendum pass and all that, you'd pay a total of 2.3 mils to the city of Tucker, and that would cover parks as it did before and add in these roads and maintenance services. And then the stormwater line you see is 72 instead of 48. Again, that's the same for everybody. And so you can look across there and see the way the taxes work out in this hypothetical dead on average case. And this is kind of side by side of those two things. Do we have the big, so there's a poster board out here in the lobby that has these two things on it so you can get up close and see how it is. This is also online, so you can go home, get out your own tax bill and kind of understand what you're looking at. There we are. Thank you, John. Very nice. Just want to do everything we can to show you as best we can, as transparently as we can, what happens to your tax bill. And that's that. So what happens if nothing happens? Well, nothing happens. You keep paying taxes the same as you were before, same rates, subject to the county changing them sooner or over time. But they continue to provide these services. You continue to call them to report your issues, call us for some help if you need response, but nothing happens. Key dates to remember, vote. And these are this is the website that I mentioned earlier. So our regular city website is tuckerga.gov. There's lots of good information there, and I really would encourage you to bookmark it someplace. There's lots of things, lots of questions you can get answered pretty quickly by going there, but publicworks specifically contains all this information that we've talked about. We have rules. We have rules. We're about to just do question and answer, anything you'd like to know about. We have, this meeting is being streamed on Zoom. We're also recording it so that we can share it with others later. So if you have a question, we just ask you to come speak in the microphone so that others can hear you and it gets recorded. If you just rather not do that, we have yellow cards. That's really the beginning and end of it. It's not all that complicated. The taxes gets to be a little hard to understand, but the basic thing is your city council and mayor have said to you, we think we can do this better. We promised we would never just sit up here one night and vote and tell you about it after the fact. So we put it into your hands, and it's what you'll vote on already or in the next few days or by a week from Tuesday. So what do we leave out? What are you concerned about? What can we tell you that'll help clear it up for you? Oh, sorry. If you don't mind, or you can just, if you can fill it out, or you can tell me and I'll repeat it, but we want everyone to be able to hear.
I'm just wondering what the impact on DeKalb County is. Does it, with removing the Tucker tax base piece, how will DeKalb County adapt to that?
Well, it's as simple as that. They lose the taxes, but they also lose the responsibility for providing the service. The cynical view is they'd probably be glad to get rid of us, frankly. But I'm just speaking as a mayor of Tucker and not as a county employee. But it should be a wash, right? If they're spending in Tucker what they collect from Tucker and that goes away, it should be all a wash and no skin off anybody's nose, except that we now think we can provide a better level of service. But the impact on them shouldn't be, it should be zero in the theoretical world. Yeah.
Just some things to point out. Actually, I got an email today from a constituent who said, all right, I've been thinking about this, right? Here's what's going on. One, they said progress has to be made, right? Two, DeKalb has not said a word about what they are doing. They haven't said a word on what their plans are for Tucker. Like, please stay. Here's what we'll do. There's not been a word about what they have put into Tucker each year or what they have fixed. So our staff has been tracking all of that stuff. So no one has said, no, please stay, right? We had meetings. Things sat for 2 years, even though we were having meetings. And so it was interesting that they pointed out, yeah, we've not heard anything from anybody there to say, oh, yes, please stay. And so, and I think the other point that you may have been making is that we don't know if the tax dollars that are being collected right now are actually being spent in the city of Tucker, because they can't tell you that, because they can't tell you what's been fixed and they can't tell you how much money is being spent here. So there is a transparency factor as well.
One other thing I'll add, come on up. There's this weird thing that happens. So I mentioned, that we pave roads and we've built some new sidewalks and things like that. We do that under a capital program. So the basic difference is capital expenditures versus maintenance, ongoing operating expenditures. So you're paying a penny in sales tax that comes back to us that has some restrictions on it, but that's what we've used all these years now to pave the roads, build new sidewalks, things like that. Weird thing is we can't fix them. We can't fix the old stuff. And the cab doesn't even know necessarily, well, Tucker's built a new sidewalk. We need to put that on our list for maintenance. It's just kind of a mismatch between them. And so a part of the point of this is we kind of get full control of our assets in the city. And when they need attention, we don't have to call somebody, we just go and do so.
So it's a pretty simple question, but who's going to do the work? I mean, do you have companies that you already use?
No.
Do you have companies that you already use? Will it bring jobs to Tucker too for people, I wonder?
That's a good question.
Kind of my question.
Yeah. So that's part of when I said we were doing some preliminary work already. We're kind of looking into what model would serve best in that case. So Ken is our city engineer, and you might know we have a contractor who provides about half of our staff at City Hall. When we began as a city, it was 100% of our staff, everybody from the city manager right down to every parks part-time program leader and that kind of thing. Over time, we've brought about half of that in-house. If we were to do this, the two extremes are we issue a contract and somebody brings whole turnkey solution. On the other hand, we hire all the people that we need, buy all the equipment that we need, all that. Almost certainly it'll be somewhere in the middle. We'll likely hire a professional company that is in this business, an engineering company that's in this business that would provide sort of senior staff. And then the city would contract, you got to have somebody that brings the asphalt, somebody else that fixes the traffic signal, somebody else that digs up a pipe to replace it. Those would be individual contracts. One of the things that does for us is it gives us the ability to really insist on certain levels of service. And so we would say to those contractors, if there's a broken stormwater pipe and it's leaking all over the street, you got 12 hours to be there, right? If it's a road that needs patching and it's not threatening anyone's life, health, and safety, it might have a 30-day limit, and then they can come and do a bunch of those repairs at once. It gives us a lot of flexibility, including the flexibility to get rid of them if they're not doing the job. So yes, there would be work. The city would be spending money in the city of Tucker, but whether we would hire a bunch of people into City Hall to do that, probably not quite like that. Yeah, it's very similar. Yeah, and it's actually similar to what DeKalb County does. They have management that's employed by the county, lots of contractors that they call on to provide the on-the-ground services.
I just have a quick clarification question. You mentioned stormwater would go from 48 to 72, and that would be the same for everyone. Is that correct?
Every single family residence.
Okay,
Yeah.
Regardless of the value of the home.
That's right.
Okay.
It's not attached to that at all.
Got it.
I'll answer the question you didn't ask, which some people wanted to know about businesses. How do they pay stormwater fee? So a single family residence is called an equivalent residential unit, an ERU. Lots of acronyms in government. A business is assessed that $72 a year based on how many ERUs they represent. So if it's a big shopping center and everything's paved, it's based on permeable or impermeable surface. So if you own a big tract of land and it's all paved, all the water that hits it runs off, it's got to go somewhere. You pay more. If you own a farm with a house on it, it's mostly permeable. And so you pay a much smaller part. But proportionally, those businesses would see an increase. It's 50%, but it's a small number. And so a big outfit might be paying $3,000 or $4,000 a year in stormwater fees now. They might pay $1,500 to $2,000 a year more, just depending on how big and how much impermeable surface they have. What else? Similar thing. She asked about what about apartments. I'm gonna take a swag and look at my experts and say it's similar to a commercial property, right? It's the coverage of the rooftops, the coverage of the parking, impermeable surfaces. They pay according to that equivalent residential unit. Hey.
Hey, do I ask you or ask you guys? Hi, I'm Anita at Onsesenko Court, and you don't know who I am, do you? Really quick,
familiar.
what's the worst case scenario? Because we've heard all the great things, but like, I just want to know, like, worst case scenario, like, could we have this crazy thing that, you know, is going to cost us a lot of money? And I mean, I know DeKalb's not doing anything, but I mean, I think it's good for us to know like what the worst
Yeah.
case scenario is. And I have another question after that, if that's okay.
Well, all right. So there was an incident, I don't know, was it 2 years ago, a big thing up on Buford Highway. I don't know what happened, but it was a big incident, lots of water flowing, and that actually involves stormwater and sanitary water. In fairness, if something like that happens, they're responding. They can't very well neglect something like that. And we would have to do the same. So if it was a $500,000 expense, it would hurt. But the point about the ARPA funds and the ability to use them in these two ways to address the backlog and to give us the cushion, we would just fund that. But in theory, over time, it all evens out. Right, we start collecting that $6 a month fee or $72 a year. Going to have some good years, some bad years, some big incidences, some long stretches where we're just, you know, fixing up the infrastructure to avoid those kinds of things. So the question I think you're getting at is, can we survive the worst case? Can we deal with that? And we're saying, yeah, we are very confident that we could. DeKalb would have the same problem. That's where they
Right.
are right
I
now.
understand.
They have to fix it, and we would too.
And then the other question is, I was wondering why we didn't have the meetings earlier. Did I miss that online? Because I didn't read. I mean,
Yeah.
like in August and September versus like now,
we had our
early
first one in
meetings,
September.
early voting's sort of over.
Yeah,
I mean, not
Yeah.
over, but we're in the midst of it and we're having these meetings. So
Yeah.
I was just curious.
yeah. We started in September, and the information's
know,
been
but I
up
mean, like,
for
earlier.
a while. But we figured part of it is that now is when people are paying attention. Right? They're
Okay.
not thinking, oh, we gotta go
right.
vote. So we got a few early
Sorry.
early takers, but yeah, no,
Okay.
it's something we thought about. But as with most things, we've been working on it a long time. The information's been out there. It just hadn't been urgent for most folks until much more lately.
Thank you.
Of course. Hey, Paul.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about this, and he was kind of concerned about something, so I thought I'd raise his question.
All right.
And his question had to do with, sure enough, we're getting a small tax increase now. As time goes along, he was afraid that we might become like Decatur, and the taxes go up, and the taxes go up, and the taxes go up. And the people that used to live there can't afford to live there anymore. And it becomes more of a white enclave of rich people, and the diversity that we enjoy in Tucker might disappear.
It's quite the doomsday scenario.
That's sort of the worst case scenario. Yeah.
Well,
Similar.
yeah, we're not quite of a scale where we could do that kind of harm, but the point remains, yeah, what's to stop expenses from getting out of hand or the city council from, you know, when we were advocating to become a city, that question was raised a lot. It's just going to be more taxes. It's going to be more levels of government. It's going to be duplication of services, so on. And we said, no, But to put our money where our mouth is, we are going to severely restrict ourselves, meaning the city council and future elected officials.
And it seems like you've done that.
We have, and I didn't cover it in the presentation, but as it stands today, the most tax the city of Tucker can charge for property taxes is 1 mil. So we started with 9/10 of a mil for parks. I was saying that we rolled that back. No matter what we wanted to do, we could never raise it above 1 mil. It would have to be by referendum. Now, part of this, and I don't want to overcomplicate it again, is raising that cap from 1 mil to 3 mils. Because even though it's a little bit more than that, but we're taking over a tax from DeKalb and adding it to ourselves, that's part of that 3 mils. So the city sets the millage rate every year based on what we think it's going to cost to provide the level of service that our people want. But should this pass, that new cap would be 3 mils. We could never go above that without a citywide public referendum just like this. So we built in some things to assure everyone it's in your hands. We can only go so far. You can fire us. That's the beauty of local government. It doesn't happen often enough, but it's built so that it can happen. And so we've built in those assurances to sort of restrain ourselves. Yeah. Yeah. And Decatur is a special case in a lot of ways. No disrespect intended, but the other cities around there, our peer cities like Chamblee and Doraville and so forth, they'll typically, their millage rate is more like 12, 13, 14%, in addition to what the county is charging, because they're providing the whole range of services, police department and a bunch of other things. So we're still on the very small end of the scale because we're only providing a limited set of services.
Hello, my name is Beverly Williams. I've been here 18 years. DeKalb County has some hiccups, and I understand that because I've been there a couple of times, challenged them about certain roads and streets because I filed my complaint. You all assisted me once. So I went there myself and I had a conversation with them. So once we had that discussion, I'm not sure if you noticed, but there are making improvements just in the last 60 days. They was understaffed, first of all, like every place else since COVID. So you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. They don't have the proper training. So I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and now they have improved since I've been going there, having a conversation with them. I'm not comfortable with the millage rate. I'm not comfortable with you all taking over the storm drainage because I have too many questions. I need a permanent fixture on who you're going to hire, because if you don't like them, what happens when everything is in a shamble when you fire them? And how many days you're going to get this completed if you fire them? Second of all, the days that they have listed up there in DeKalb County, I've seen those are even less. So the items that you put for how many days in certain areas, they've gone down and up. It just depends on the location where they are. Yes, I have fought with DeKalb County on certain issues, on certain roads, and certain roads I don't even live on. I was fighting for you all for certain things, but they have made an effort. Right now, I'm not comfortable for you all taking over because I still need the contractors. I still need to know, are you not going to raise? I know you can't raise our millage rate, 0.3. I already did my homework. I got that. And I have to agree, I need a better plan than what you're offering, technically. So I would have to vote no for this.
All right. I'll respond to a couple of things that you said. So the numbers that we showed, those are our numbers. That's our experience over 6 years of doing this. So whatever they might have been at one time or another, or if they've improved in the last 60 days because we've called a referendum, I can't speak to that. They are where they are. We're essentially asking you for a job. It's not going to hurt my feelings if it's a no vote. I think we'd miss an opportunity. I think we'd continue to suffer under an unacceptably low level of service. But we don't have anything to gain particularly, except we're doing what believe we're elected to do, which is find a way to provide services at a higher level and more effectively with your tax dollars. And so that's what this is all about, is explaining as best we can. We can't contract with somebody today because we don't have authority to do it. We don't have any money to pay them. We're working on that, and there's some very professional firms that have been doing it for a long time that we'll have a process to evaluate them, and just like we do with every other sort of project, make sure that we get the best deal we can on behalf of the city and by way of our citizens. So yeah, I mean, I get it. People are suspicious of government. People are cynical about government. If you want to stick with DeKalb County, that's exactly the choice you have. Yes, sir. Hey.
Good evening. I'm Bob Morris. It's good to be here. It's good to be anywhere at my age.
I like your sticker.
Yes, I'm probably the oldest guy in the room. I probably lived here longer than anybody else. I lived here 48 years since 1975. A lot of good things have happened in Tucker. My question, and I probably missed it, is anything going to come off our DeKalb County tax?
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's, go ahead.
Okay.
You can ask.
No, go ahead.
Well, yeah, so that's what's on here. Now, I want to be real clear. So in this case, that first line of, I'm sorry, just under 1 mil
Mhm.
goes to 0, but it's added into the next line. In other words, we would be taking that over from them.
Okay.
And what I want to be clear about is we're going to take that and add a little bit more. So that's the 70 or however many dollars on the value of your house. You'd see a net increase of 70 or 90 or so dollars.
And this was something that I wondered about back in 2014, 15, and took me aside and gave me a good education about why we were not going to do this at the outset, and that basically we were going to get up and running. And that there would come a time like tonight when we would look at this. But a lot of good things have happened in Tucker. I voted today and I've voted to support it. So the cat's out of the bag as far as I'm concerned. But a lot of good things have happened. A lot of things, Brockett Road is getting fixed. And I don't know who all I need to thank in this room, but I'm going to tell you, we've been trying to fix that for Lord knows how long. And it's getting fixed. And I have nothing but good things to say about what's happened. I've never looked back of moving to Tucker, and I've never looked back about becoming a city. And so a lot of good things have happened. And I've got a great deal of faith in our city council and our mayor. And I'm not saying that because I don't know whether you're a Democrat or Republican or whatever, but I'm just looking at the facts. And I appreciate what's going on in Tucker. And thank you.
Well, thanks for saying so. Who else? Anything at all? Standing right here. Well, come on. Stump me. Ask me a question.
Okay, I'll talk. I'm James. So I feel confident that you've gone and done your homework. I'm glad to see that you've gone into the pipes, some of the pipes, and kind of looked at the infrastructure that we were dealing with. Don't want to go into this blind. We want to, look at the condition of what we're dealing with. We don't end up with a Dearborn, Michigan problem when it's like, oh my goodness, the whole place is caving in, and now it's our baby to take care of.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we've done a lot of that work. And thank you, because you reminded me to mention something I said I was going to come back to. Maybe the big thing to remember is whatever's out there is out there. Whatever's going to go bad is going to go bad. The question is, who's going to fix it? Who's going to respond to the citizens of Tucker to see that it gets dealt with? If it turns out there, and it may turn out that there's a lot of pipe down there that's being crushed, rusting, breaking, what have you. We've had incidents. I'll tell you about one in a second. Whatever it is, it's there. And the question is, if it happened under DeKalb's watch and they didn't have the money, guess what they're going to do? They're going to raise your fees because they got to pay for it. That's the way it works. We're saying we recognize, given what other cities have experienced and what our professionals tell us and all that, we've estimated what we think we need to spend on all those parts to clear the backlog and get to a level of regular maintenance. And that's what it is. If we're wrong, the cab would have been wronger. Wronger a word? Yeah, I'm gonna say wrong or. But you understand my point. We want to be responsible for it. We want to, this is a thing, not in our lifetime are we going to build a water system to deliver drinking water exclusively to the city of Tucker, right? We're going to always cooperate with DeKalb on that particular service. When we were advocating to become a city, our point was never, let's divorce ourselves and become an island, totally segregated from DeKalb County. Our philosophy on the whole thing about cityhood was we want to take the things that we can do better locally, right? Zoning. Ann was on the planning commission for DeKalb County. Zoning comes up at North Lake Mall or in Smoke Rise, 7 people in Decatur from all over the county make that decision. There's no reason for that. So we formed a city so that 7 people from Tucker sit on the planning commission, 7 people from Tucker cast the final votes on what to approve and not to approve. And so this is a natural progression, I think, as Bob might have alluded to. A similar model to what we've done with parks. We hire some serious professionals. I don't know how to build a park. I don't know how to plan a park system, but we hire professionals that can do that. And we make those decisions among friends of parks locally, among us. And so this fits into that category of something that we can isolate to the city of Tucker, take control of our own destiny. You know where to find me. I see you in the grocery store. Been driving the same car for 10 years. People know what I drive. So there's nowhere to hide. And that's the beauty of local government, as I said before. So we're putting ourselves out there for that.
Yeah, on the American Rescue Plan Act, you said we've got 13.6 million. How much of that are we planning to set aside for startup costs for this?
Thanks for the reminder again, because something that I have not been saying. So one of the first jobs should we pass the referendum and take it over, is we would conduct a thorough pipe by pipe, catch basin by catch basin analysis, as in pull a camera through each one and see what's in there and what condition it's in. So we're going to have a lot of priorities to begin with, right? We got all the people who are waiting on something to be repaired. We will have on day one something new that gets reported that becomes our responsibility. But we're gonna have a full accounting of the system that's going to provide several things for us. First, it's going to set our priorities in addition to all the stuff that's reported and we know needs to be addressed. We're going to find a pipe somewhere that hadn't broken yet, but it's about to, and we want to get to that pronto. So we're going to kind of have all that at once in the beginning. That study it's in the range, on the order of $1 million just to do that analysis. But when we've done it, not only will we have all that condition data, our GIS system will be able to then locate all those things, and we will know, in fact, is that a 24-inch pipe and does it run where we think it runs? It'll all be on our mapping system. You can see it, we can see it. Everyone who works in the ground in the city of Tucker will be able to see it. It's a huge step forward, because a lot of the problems that happen come with digging, rebuilding roads, new construction, a whole variety of things, and just knowing exactly where it is. And then as we add things over time, they'll be in there as well. So there's a big chunk of money devoted to that as a kind of a startup cost. We'll make an estimate. I hesitate to say, but I think we would be reserving something on the order of a couple $2 million against this backlog and some contingencies should something happen, on a large scale early in the going before we've collected much in the way of fees. And I'm going to answer one more question that hadn't been asked, and that is, what about all this stuff that's reported and needs to be fixed? Is Tucker going to spend its own money on all that stuff, or is DeKalb going to make good on that? Well, we're going to have a fight about that. and I'm determined that that's not our liability. But even if it becomes our liability, it'll be fixed and it'll be right, and we'll be maintaining it from that point forward, and we won't find ourselves back in this spot again. So we're gonna have some words for DeKalb County starting really soon. Tomorrow, maybe. Hey, Ann.
Mr. Mayor,
social security number, please.
Yeah, see him. Consent decree. How will the city of Tucker, how will will we be impacted by the consent decree, good or bad?
Good question. The answer is none. So the consent, very indirectly, the consent decree has to do with the water, what we call drinking water, think of as sanitary water. So that has to do with, where treatment plants are and how they provide water to your house and that sort of thing. There is some overlap because these pipes run together, sometimes on top of each other, sometimes over the top of each other. Some of what you hear, if I can get down in the weeds just a little bit, in the water system, some of the pipes that carry that water are compromised. They have cracks in them. They're older. So you hear it talked about as stormwater, but what's happening is stormwater is seeping into the drinking water pipes, and you get these overflows. So it sounds like stormwater, but it's not the stormwater that we're talking about. That makes sense. That's sort of accidental stormwater that gets in a place it doesn't belong, interferes with the water system. But what we're talking about is taking care of that water to begin with, through these conduits and ditches and that sort of thing. That makes sense? All right, I'm going to bang the gavel here in a second, and we'll stay around. Please stop and pick up literature over there. It'll have that website on it. You can ask us questions. You can send questions to, can you go to that last screen again, just so they can see the points of contact? Well, there are four important dams. Yeah, there are lots of lakes, ponds, detention ponds, and it's a complicated business because some of those, there's a wide variety of, maybe it's on your property and you own it, you have to maintain it. Maybe it's in your neighborhood and you have a homeowners association who's responsible for maintaining it. Maybe it's a public facility like Cofer Lake and Cofer Dam, where DeKalb County or the city of Tucker takes care of it. And that's all, that'll all be outlined in a big fat document that defines those things. Gone. Thank y'all for being here. Please tell your friends, please go vote.